Safety consciousness in our profession. So let's review a couple of safety issues unique to the Long Beach Convention Center. First, let's see a show of hands of people who are certified in first aid or CPR. Good, now you know where to go. Secondly, everyone should know that defibrillators are located in the first aid office at the bottom of the escalators just before the entrance to the exhibit hall. The first aid office is staffed with an EMT during show hours while our attendees are here on site. Now be sure to arrive on time at all sessions to hear the rest of our tips, and please, everyone, let's stay safe. Now please join me in welcoming to the stage SWANA's Executive Director and Chief Executive Officer, John Skinner, who will introduce our speakers.
Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you to our first mega session, and looking at the crowd, this is a mega session. What a turnout. Thank you all for coming. Before introducing our speakers, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Cascade Cart Solutions and Environmental Solutions Group, who have made the mega sessions possible. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you. We have two speakers today. They're both going to spend about 20 minutes each, and we'll take Q&A at the end after both of them have spoken, and we should have a good amount of time for questions and answers. There are microphones. There's a microphone in this aisle, and a microphone will be in that aisle there. Please, if you have questions, come up to the microphone so everyone can hear the questions. At the end of the session, there will be a $250 drawing, so hang around to the end. You might be lucky. And we'll have someone pull the cards out of the rotating drum for the drawing. Our first speaker this afternoon is David Newman. David is the president of the International Solid Waste Association, ISWA. He was educated in London, but he's lived in Rome, in Italy, for probably the last 25 years. He completed his degree at Manchester University, a first-class honors degree in modern history and economics. In his early part of his career, he was a trader in paper and waste paper on the international markets. He was a Greenpeace volunteer. He led Greenpeace Italy for several years, and he worked for several national and local governments on environmentally sound solutions. He is currently the manager of the Italian Composting Council and has built it into one of the largest composting associations in the world. He was elected to the ISWA board in 2010. He was elected vice president, and just last September, he became the president of ISWA, and he has a two-year term as president, and during that period, he's focusing his attention on bringing financial resources to help developing nations invest in waste infrastructure. Please welcome David Newman.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Dr. Skinner, for this introduction, and I'm overwhelmed by the hospitality and the friends that I've met here, and very pleased to be here indeed. Now, both John Skidmore and I are British, and as Winston Churchill said, we are two nations divided by a common language, so I'm sure that some of the phrases and the words and the terms that I use, and maybe that John uses in his speech later on, will not be clear to you, so please don't hesitate during the question time to ask for clarification. Now, you're the worst possible audience for me to talk to, because you all know about waste. And I'm sure you all know a lot more about waste than I do. But what I would try to do in this next 20 minutes is to try to give you some sort of perceptions and some concepts to conceptualize where we are today in our world, and to try to put you in a bigger frame and to give you a bigger picture of our very big world. I'm proud to be the president of a global association. SWANA is the national member for North America, and we are present in about 35 countries around the world, with members in about 90, I believe, about 40,000 members altogether through the national associations worldwide. And it's apt we are a global association because, of course, this is a global industry. About 4 billion tons of waste get put into the environment every year. About half of that is household waste. And really, it's probably the only industry worldwide today that can say that almost everybody on the planet is its customer. Globally, we're turning over about $420 billion, and we have a lot of employees, some of whom are regular employees, and a lot of whom, as we will see later, are scavengers. And by the way, just a note, don't take any of these data too seriously, and don't take any data on waste too seriously, because they're all reasonably inaccurate. There's some global challenges which we all face, and we face these day to day, and sometimes we don't realize what they are. Climate change, we are guilty of methane emissions from landfills and also black carbon emissions or soot emissions from burning landfills. We are a major player in the whole question of food security. A third to 40% of food is wasted either in the production, the transport, or the post-consumer space. We face questions of resilience as the climate changes and as our planet changes. We face questions of how to plan for that in the future. And when I say resilience, just think of the floods you've had in Colorado and the floods we had in the spring this year in Central Europe and the number of landfills that went downstream with them. Certainly in Austria, Germany, and Switzerland, this has happened. And we're major players in the space of resources, some of them scarce, some of them less so. And how the resource game works through is very important to our industry and its future. There's many types of rubbish, lots of garbage, lots of trash. You all know it. I'm not going to rest upon this slide for very long. But what is interesting to note is how big a role is played in developing countries by organics. Wet waste, kitchen waste, food waste, and it is a very large part of the waste stream simply because, in one sense, all the others are a much smaller percentage of the waste than you have in developed countries. I was interested to see the data for Central Florida, and maybe somebody from Florida here can correct me, where you have actually now more plastics in terms of volume than you do food waste. A lot of this waste is ending up in the water streams, in the oceans. Plastics, above all, are playing a greater role. When I was a kid, there were virtually no plastics in the waste stream. Today, we can see that where those dark blue patches are on the world's globe, we have data here from about 60 or 70 countries. Plastics are a very large part in volumes of the waste stream, sometimes over 20%. What are we doing with all our waste worldwide? Well, none of you will be surprised to know that we're not doing very much with it. 70% of it is going into landfill, but into open dumps in developing countries. We're incinerating some of it. We are recycling some of it. And the consequences of all this, or the bad management of our waste, the poor management of waste in many parts of the world, is that we are now emitting around about 1 billion tons of CO2 equivalents. And the bad news is that by the end of my lifetime, in about 20 years' time, well, I hope I'm still around in 20 years' time, we will have trebled that to about 3 billion tons. And that's mainly methane gas coming from landfills in developing countries. Well, the consequences of all this, you don't need to be Einstein to be able to work it out yourself, but we're losing resources that we could recover. We are, as I said, we are producing emissions. We're losing employment opportunities. For every 10,000 tons of waste landfilled, if you recycle it, you create 10 jobs more. We're destroying natural resources. We said we are creating illegal trade and eco-dumping in waste, and we are creating health hazards, particularly in our urban areas, and we will see this later. And we're also creating ocean litter, and ocean litter is one of the very hot topics which we meet now every day when we're discussing waste in the international arena. Well, those little red patches are ocean garbage patches in the principal oceans around the world. I didn't realize we had 5. Well, we now have an ocean garbage patch near you somewhere. We know that waste grows with income. The richer we are, the more waste we produce. You can't see the numbers here. Isn't that good? I can say anything. But down on the bottom left, you have the very poor countries who are producing little waste, and the very rich countries up on the right who are producing roughly about 750 kilos per capita. I think Luxembourg, strangely enough, is the country in the world where we produce most waste. So in our industry, there are many worlds, and they're worlds apart. And what I want to try to focus on over the next few minutes is the 3 worlds as we are today. Let's look at the advanced economies and how waste management in its most advanced state has progressed. And there is a series of what I would almost call killer apps. These are the apps you need to be in waste manager's heaven, okay? To be able to declare your country or your region or your state what I would call a very mature system. First of all, and this doesn't happen around the world very, very much, you want to be collecting it at all. There'll be no illegal dumping, you'll be recycling, composting, you'll have waste-to-energy plants, and funnily enough, you will not have opposition to those waste-to-energy plants because people will be used to them. You'll have incentives for renewable energy for feed-in tariffs. You'll have taxes on disposal, extended producer responsibility schemes for many of the waste streams. In Europe, I think we have them now for about 10, but John Skidmore will tell us more about that later. And you won't have any informal sector. You won't have any illegal waste picking and waste collecting. And you'll have lots of sexy technology. You'll have anaerobic digesters, you'll have incinerators, and you'll have underground collection schemes. And I was recently in Sweden, and where you have everything. It really is, waste manager's heaven, and you have all these systems in place. Now, while we have the photo of the waste-to-energy plant there, let me remind you, ladies and gentlemen, that on Thursday afternoon in room 104A, there will be an ISVA organized waste-to-energy energy recovery working group or working session that I really ask you all to take note of and attend. People have come from all over the world to speak to you, and I'm sure they will have many interesting things to say on that subject. The debate in these countries, and in your country, is about waste prevention. It's about finding the balance between recovering energy and recovering materials, and not many countries have found that, actually. It's about how recycling markets will work out. The Chinese green fence issue is very much on everybody's mind. It is about how we go to zero landfill, and countries have almost achieved this in Europe. I'm talking of Germany, Denmark, Switzerland, and other countries that are going virtually to zero landfill. We're talking about resilience, how to plan for the future, how to plan for a changing climate, and we're also talking about zero waste, of course. How we define zero waste is something else. What are we spending? Well, in Europe, we're spending about 150 to 200 euro per capita. That represents about 1.1% of gross domestic product per year. People say to me, "Whoa, that's a lot of money." But actually, it's less than a cup of coffee a day when you think about it, and you expect us to clean the streets as well, not just collect your waste and recycle it and take it away and make it smell nice. 3 cups of coffee a day. But we don't always get it right. Sometimes we pretend to recycle. Nobody's perfect. So this is the situation we have in our economies and our countries today, and these are situations which I think you recognize. Now we're going to come to a second category of countries which I would call the countries which are racing to catch up. And this little video from the television comes from southern Italy, but it could come from any of these countries you see coming up on the screen. And these are all countries which wish they had collection systems at 100%, but they don't. They have very low recycling levels. They have very high use of landfill and often some illegal dumping. In Italy, where I come from, we have over 5,000 illegal dumps satellite mapped. We have very, very low incineration levels and very strong public opposition to them. And that public opposition works through the political system as well. Low or sometimes no incentives for renewable energy and low application or very few extended producer responsibility schemes. And sometimes very, very low disposal taxes and informal sector recycling. So you're seeing that some of the killer apps we had in the waste managers' heaven countries we don't have here. And so we have a lot of a debate. The debate is about whether to introduce on some of these waste streams extended producer responsibility, how much taxes people should pay to be able to pay for it all, how do we close the dumps, how do we recover energy, how do we reduce our emissions from the waste sector. And the spend in countries like this, well, southern Italy is a little bit different, of course, but I've taken Serbia as being a country which is coming into the European Union over the next few years. We are talking here about 50, 60 euro a year. Now, the question is how much will they have to spend by 2020, by 2025 to catch up with European legislation and be in the same waste managers' heaven that we talked about in the first session. Well, then we have the developing world. How many people have actually been to the heart of Africa, to Southeast Asia? How many people have seen landfills in developing countries? Okay, quite a few. That's good. Well, you'll know what I'm talking about then, because you're talking about here very low-income countries, but they are very, very fast developing countries. But we're talking about 4.5 to 5 billion people, so really the great majority of the world's population. Southeast Asia, China, India, Latin America, Africa, you know all the places where they are, where open dumps and uncontrolled landfills are the order of the day. We don't have extended producer responsibility schemes, we don't have any formal recycling, and we certainly don't have any waste to energy. People, paradoxically, will protest against an incinerator, but they will be very happy to live near this. It's crazy, isn't it? We have very few taxes, and the planning capacity is very low indeed, and the incentives for renewables are non-existent, and we have a very, very large informal sector in these countries. And in these countries, collection is a challenge. Again, a lovely graph there. Whoops, where's it gone? Which you can't see. But on the top left-hand corner are the rich countries where collection is 100%, and on the bottom right-hand corner are the very poor countries where collection is really no more than about 30% in a lot of these places. And dumps are the rule, and so you have these images all over. There's unsound disposal, and where there's unsound disposal, there are very, very low recycling rates. And recycling, the recycling there is in these countries is very often a very low-income survival activity. And there's a sad connection between that, isn't there? People burning copper wires and plastic wires to get the copper out, and people sorting waste out of a landfill. Well, they get sick. And there's a very, very close correlation between bad waste management and bad health. And which is what we are really, ladies and gentlemen. We're waste managers, but above all, we're health managers. And just to finish off these series of images, but if you've been to the third world, you will see that the video is the landfill in Nairobi, where people are not just living in it, but they're actually eating out of it. And you will see these images everywhere you go over the poor parts of Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia. Well, a bit of a mess, isn't it, really? So you're all pretty depressed now, aren't you? Yes. Okay, well, why is all this happening? Now I know you're all very intelligent people. I run through these quite quickly. Well, the world got richer. Hey, that's good news, isn't it? We all thought that we wanted the world to get richer, and we have done so. We have taken billions of people out of abject poverty over the last 2 or 3 decades. The world urbanized. Now half the population of the world lives in a city somewhere, and that will go to 65 to 70% in the next 20 to 30 years. And these megacities, cities of over 10 million people, are growing without any planning whatsoever, and without the capacity of the city authorities to plan for this huge, great flow of people moving into their centers. Now, some 300,000 people a day, 2 million people a week are walking from the countryside to a city somewhere around the world. And of course, public services lag behind. They really struggle to keep up with this, whether it's transport, whether it's health, whether it's waste and water, sewage. And healthcare is a very, very big issue in all of these centers. So there's a big spending gap, isn't there? There's not money there to do the job, and the World Bank said that the 3.5 billion people around the world who don't even have the basic collection systems in place need today to spend around about 40 billion this year to get those collection systems in place. But if we don't do something about it, ladies and gentlemen, well, that figure will more than double over the next 10, 12 years. More than treble, sorry, over the next 10, 12 years. So it's a very, very large spending gap which we have to get these basic services to these countries. And you can see why these basic services are lacking. People in Jakarta, I was there at the end of June, spend 50 cents a month for their waste collection and waste treatment systems. And Jakarta's, the canals and the rivers are full of waste, and waste is burning all around the city center, next to 5-star hotels and 6-star restaurants. What will they need to spend in the next 10 years to get it right? Well, they're going to need to be spending a lot more than that, that's for sure. And here the debate in developing countries, and those of you who know them will know the debate, is about how to close the dumps and make proper landfills, about how to guarantee that the waste is collected, and how to make it pay taxes, extended producer responsibility schemes, how to make recycling work, how to plan for it, and which technologies are appropriate. There are so many unscrupulous salesmen going out selling inappropriate technologies in these places. There are many things we need to define, and we need to define population growth and decline. It's not all about growth. Decline in rural areas, but decline in countries like Ukraine, The Minister of Environment in Ukraine said to me in May, well, this is all very well, Mr. Newman, but how do you build a waste plant today knowing that in 10 years' time your population will be 1/3 less? Everything you build today will be overcapacitized. This is one of the problems of Germany. How to create national strategies. Who's got the responsibility for it? What are the administrative areas? What are the economic models in developing countries to make it pay? Can they copy our models, or what developing country models do we have to invent? And what are the appropriate technologies? Really, we're talking about creating regulatory and financial frameworks for these countries, some of which have begun to do so. It's not all negative. What are we doing as an association? Well, we're doing a lot of capacity building. This year, our association, I'm very proud to say, will be active in 58 capacity building and training projects throughout the world, whether they're site visits, whether they're in situ training courses, whether they are helping local governments do their planning and such like, 58 projects. But we really need to gear up the training. And I've asked the World Bank and I've asked other donors to come up with a significant amount of money so that we can really train people on a large scale in these countries, so when they go back home they know what they're talking about. And I'm pleased to announce that the University of Texas at Arlington, with the city of Denton, has already established what they call SMART, the Sustainable Management of Resources and Training Center, which aims to do just some of this, the training of people coming from developing countries. We need to help these countries do strategic long-term planning. And not just these countries. Well, I come from Italy. We don't even have a strategic long-term waste plan in our country. So you can imagine how difficult it is to do it in some of the developing countries. We need to create a business-friendly framework so that people will go there with their money and know that they've got a reasonable chance of getting a payback on the investment. And we need to create legislative structure, local bylaws that will encourage people to go there and invest. And we need to understand who pays. It really is not acceptable to say somebody else has to pay, everybody has to pay to protect the environment and to clean up their situation. And we need, and again we are discussing this with the international donors and with the international foundations, we need seed money for financing startups in some of these countries, collection systems and basic treatment plants, landfill design and such like. Remember, half the world's population doesn't have waste collection systems, so we need quite a considerable amount of money. And that's what we are trying to leverage at the moment. And one of the leverages we have is jobs. Waste creates jobs, as I said early on, and the EU shows this, that the number of jobs goes up continually as the amount of recycling of waste increases. Well, what you can do, ladies and gentlemen, is get active, and you're all waste managers, so I know you're active already. And I'm active as well, and John is here, and we're all here because we are active. Here's some friends of yours down on San Diego Beach. There they are, cleaning up the beach because they want their beach not to look like this, full of waste. They want it to look like this, and so do we all. And we have to get active, and we have to talk to our politicians and talk to our politicians locally and on national level about the need for activity and investments, above all in developing countries. It's an ethical question. I don't think that we can allow the world to be polluted and leave a polluted world to our children and our grandchildren, but it's also a business question. It really is in our interest as waste managers to call for action on waste at a global level. Look at China. China has put up the green fences, increasing its recycling. There'll be a lot of business being done there on putting in compost and anaerobic digestion plants, MRF facilities. They have announced already $120 billion investments in incinerators between now and 2025, and I know our friends here from the Waste to Energy Working Group are active in China, helping the Chinese to plan and develop these projects. So it really is a good match between business and ethics. Now let's close with some good news. I mean, I got you very depressed earlier on, and everyone's going to go to the bar and have a whiskey after this, I think, to recover. But there's some really good news around the world, and I travel it very, very widely. Singapore has got a really, really good program, which is already in place and is looking towards higher material recovery over the next 10 years. Belgium, well, you know, a little country stuck up there in the north of Europe. We have 80% recycling rates in Belgium today, with a whole series of schemes from pay-as-you-throw to door-to-door collection and such like. And the China circular, or the Southeast Asia circular economy philosophy, which the Chinese threw out 2 or 3 years ago, we still have to see the way it works itself through the green fence and such like, and what the impact will be on the future of recycling markets. But certainly, at last, they have come around to thinking that they, too, cannot afford to let their waste go to waste. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the role of ISVA and NGOs and IGOs is, as I said before, to help cities to assess their needs through the climate and clean air campaign, which was set up by Hillary Clinton in Durban 2 years ago. We are working on assessing the city needs of 10 major cities around the world, and 2014 they will become 20. We're helping them plan to close methane gas emitting landfills and burning landfills. And as I said, we need to help on capacity building, training, planning, etc., etc. ISVA can't do this alone. We're a small association, even though we're many people around the world. So we work together with a lot of different entities, a lot of letters there. I don't really know what they mean, actually. Does anybody? WB, World Bank, I think. Yeah, UNEP, the United Nations Environmental Programme, the Climate Change Convention, and so on, working to leverage and to catalyze change to bring these solutions. And it's solutions we need because we all want to live in a clean world, and you can join us as you join SWANA and join the international organization, and give us a hand, ladies and gentlemen, because we need it, but above all, the world needs it, and it needs it now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. That's a really eye-opening presentation of conditions around the world. For more information about ISVA, there's a table at the SWANA booth on the show floor that has loads of information on membership, their conferences, their programs, and please stop by. There's someone from the ISVA staff has come over from Vienna, and they'd be happy to deal with you. I'd now like to welcome John Skidmore, who is the president of the UK Chartered Institute for Waste Management. He's been involved in the waste sector for 32 years. He works for East Riding of Yorkshire Council, which is a municipality in England, and he's responsible for all outside services, highways, car parking, enforcement, grass cutting, landscape, street lighting, and all waste and recycling activities, as well as managing the council's fleet of vehicles. He was elected president of the Chartered Institution of Waste Management in October at a ceremony that took place in the House of Commons in Westminster, London. Let's welcome John.
Good afternoon, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, friends. As CIWM President, I'm delighted to be speaking at your conference today, and thank you for the very warm welcome that I've received whilst being here so far. I've been impressed with what I've seen over the last couple of days, and clearly things are happening across America. CIWM has a special relationship with SWANA, and I intend to continue to promote that going forward. You may be interested to know that I'm a customer of one of SWANA's chapters, as I pay for garbage collection in Polk County in Florida, as I have a villa there, so I keep an eye on what's happening in America. I hope my presentation today provides some thoughts for you, challenges your thinking based on what we've done in the UK, as we today in this audience are the leaders today in waste and garbage management, as David's alluded to, and we need to show leadership long term. We have learned from our mistakes in the UK on the way too. We have a good strong relationship with the waste contractors through our Environmental Service Association, and we work very well together. So turning to my presentation, I intend to provide a high-level overview of what's been happening in the UK, plus some presidential priorities of mine. So UK in the European context, it's all about resource security, in my view. I'm going to cover what waste we have, what does it look like, look at it from a European perspective and what's been happening over the last 15 years in Europe and what trends there are. Look at the policy drivers that have been put in place through the EU Waste Framework Directive and the landfill tax regime in the UK. Look at the responsibility, who holds responsibility, local authorities or private contractors, and for what. Look at the fiscal influences that have affected the waste and resource industry in the UK, and look at how we're moving and promoting a circular economy to politicians in the UK moving forward. And then I'll take a little look to the future. So in terms of resource security, consumption patterns, as David's alluded to, are continuing to increase exponentially. We're consuming far too much as a society. There's a rapid growth in the population expected, as covered by David, so we're going to get a great increase in the population. And there's a rapid growth forecast in urbanisation, again, as David's alluded to. Recycling is expected to grow worldwide by 3%. But it's all about resource efficiency and security in the long term, about securing resources and putting those resources back to work. That's going to be the long-term game as a world that we face. We're also promoting a new design community in the UK, so we design materials for disassembly, so we can use that product, take it apart, and then reuse that product again and put it back to work rather than landfilling it, and only really disposing of material that we cannot put back to work. So we're promoting a new design community in the UK. For example, it's about dismantling and remanufacture. For example, the TV. One latest manufacturer's come out, you can disassemble a TV in 18 minutes. So it's about protecting and preserving and putting the rare earth materials back to work, because once they've gone to landfill, they've gone for good. We've got to look at how we use our resources, dismantle and remanufacture in the long term. So, each year in the European Union alone, we throw away 3 billion tonnes of waste. This amounts to about 6 tonnes of solid waste for every man, woman and child. So how much of what have we got? So in the UK, it is estimated that 600 million tonnes of products and materials enter the UK economy each year, but only 115 million tonnes of this gets recycled. Between now and 2020, electronic waste in the UK will total more than 12 million tonnes. And nearly 25% of WEEE that is taken to household waste recycling centres could be reused. And that's what we're focusing on in reuse, dismantling and creating an industry around secondary reuse and dismantling infrastructure. We throw away 7 million tonnes of food and drink every year from our homes, much of which could have been consumed. We consume, we have supermarkets offering 2 for 1, and clearly that's not good because people buy that and then they don't use the food. So there's a lot of food that we're wasting, and we're clearly promoting better use because it's good in terms of families and putting that use of food better use within the family. In the UK hospitality sector, in hotels, pubs, restaurants and quick service restaurants, we could save £724 million a year by tackling food waste that is put out for disposal. And this is only the tip of the iceberg. So clearly a lot of material in the UK. So what's been the story so far? Well, we introduced the landfill tax in the UK because landfill was too cheap. Between £7 and £10 a tonne, 10, 12 years ago. So what happened in terms of looking at our long term, we introduced landfill tax at £7 per tonne on the gate fee. Does anybody know what the gate fee, landfill tax gate fee in the UK is today? £72 on top of disposal. So you're paying a £72 tax on top of disposal. And that's driven alternatives to landfill. The government has intervened in the market to create the conditions so that other technologies become available and value for money. So over that period, over 9 million tonnes of local authority, municipality collected waste has been diverted from landfill. That's been the driver, landfill tax. We've also had the EU Landfill Directive restricting what you can send in terms of biodegradable municipal waste to landfill over 2010, 2013 and 2020, reducing over that period. Otherwise, each country will get fined multi-million pound fines from the EU Commission. Again, a fiscal driver to change behaviour and activity in the UK. Household waste recycling rates have consequently increased from 11% in 2000 to around 40% across the country. In some authorities, for example mine, will be at 65% this year. So from municipalities, a municipality collecting from 350,000 population achieving 65% recycling from segregated collections. And 52% of commercial and industrial waste was reused or recycled in 2009 compared to 4% in 2002. So a big step change over the past 10-12 years. And 173 municipalities are now collecting 5 or more recyclables at the curbside. That gives you the last 15 years in terms of Europe, looking at 1995 to 2010. The green sector is recycling and composting, the yellow is incineration, and in terms of the red is landfill. So that is accelerating. That graph will accelerate over the past 3 years. So you'll see the green continue to grow and landfill reducing significantly. And that's been the trend. The top line is around waste production, as David said, around economic growth. But what you'll see over the last 3 years and the last couple of years is a reduction because of austerity and the recession that's globally. So you'll see a reduction over the past 5 years. In the UK, in terms of tonnage, we're looking around 25 million tonnes. That's the blue is England, the green is Scotland, the red is Wales, and the blue, the small amount on the blue is Northern Ireland. And what you can see with the line across is a reduction per person in terms of the waste generated, dropping quite dramatically to around 440 kilograms per person per annum. So a significant reduction around waste prevention and reducing and getting that message over to the Great British people in terms of their behaviour and choices and not just consuming more. So you can see over the last couple of years a general reduction in the amount of overall waste that we're collecting, both residual, general garbage, dry recyclables and compostables. Solid recovered fuel and refuse-derived fuel is being sent to Europe at the moment, about 1 million tonnes a year. The reason is there's overcapacity in Sweden, in Germany and the Netherlands. They've not enough waste for their municipal waste incinerators. And the gate fees they're offering are attractive in the UK. So we have about 1 million tonnes being exported because there's overcapacity. And that will continue for some time in Europe, in those countries where they've not enough waste to fuel the incinerators for the heating that they generate in the communities. So it's a key issue that's affecting the UK at the moment. So in terms of what motivates policy, it's really around the bottom line and targets. So it's big leadership, big targets, and in terms of bottom line gate fee. In terms of responsibility for risk, the municipalities in Europe are responsible for general risk, so they own the energy from waste facilities typically and the major facilities. In the UK it's different. The private contractors take the responsibility, so municipalities don't own energy from waste facilities or landfill. That's with the private contractors, and that's a significant issue in terms of risk management. They provide much needed energy to communities, and that's why the material's going overseas in terms of Europe at the moment, around 1 million tonnes. But there's a growing illegal market as well that's happening, and people sending waste into Europe that's not been pre-treated, and it's something that the Environment Agency are now taking tough action on in terms of illegal waste operators in Northern Ireland, Scotland and in England over the last couple of months. So resource management, the future. We're consuming almost 3 planets presently, and we've only one. I'm promoting, and CIWM are promoting, a policy that is cross-party and spans successive governments, because we cannot consume 3 planets when we've got one long-term. And my presidential push is on looking at planning for 100 years hence and our great-grandchildren, and what would they say when they look back at what we did today as leaders in this room around waste and garbage resource management for the future. So the solution we're working towards in the UK and promoting is one of a circular economy, one which captures materials so that the goods are remanufactured or reused to become tomorrow's goods rather than landfill, putting the materials back to work. So the importance is around developing and growing the issue of product design, and we're engaging with designers around product design so that designs build in disassembly in mind and we can reuse those materials in different forms. The role of the big supermarkets, the Walmarts of this world, have power and influence over our residents, and we're engaging with those around packaging and what people buy and influencing behavioural change to do the right thing. People in the UK have got recycling, they feel good about it, but the agenda we have is waste prevention. So we need to look beyond short-term austerity and coming out of recession and global recession, and we need to plan over successive governments. That's the message in the UK that we're promoting. So what is a circular economy? A circular economy is an alternative to a traditional linear economy, which is make, use and dispose, in which we keep resources in use for as long as possible, extract the maximum value from them whilst in use, then recover and regenerate products and materials at the end of each life, not just one life. That's what it looks like in terms of design, manufacture, retailer, consumer, reuse, repair, recycling sector, and then again, redesign and remanufacture. That's a circular economy that we're promoting in the UK to put those resources back to work. A linear one is looking at natural resources in terms of taking them, making them, and disposing them and using them once. That's not sustainable long term. For example, in terms of food waste, we need to make sure that people use food waste and only buy what they need and reuse that. But clearly, we've got composting collection systems. We can put that through an anaerobic digester or an in-vessel composter, put that back to agriculture, and then in terms of manufacturing. So a circular economy around food waste. In terms of electricals, in terms of a circular economy, is again around material production, manufacturing, retail service, use and then repair or reuse, collection, recycling, and putting those materials back to work. So it's not a linear, it's a circular economy. That's what we're promoting to British government around policy and what we need in terms of policy engagement with Europe. Health and safety, the story so far. It's a presidential priority for mine, has been for many, many years, but we're killing too many in our industry. With too many people getting killed and with too many people getting injured. And it's something that I've worked on in Scotland, Northern Ireland and in England in promoting how we work better together to improve health and safety. In terms of UK fatalities, last year 16 workers died. 2 died last week, 1 in London and 1 in Dublin. And you can see we had 15 workers died in 2010. And each one of those has got a family associated with it. And clearly a lot of these can be avoided because people come into contact with our vehicles, get crushed at transfer stations, out on collection rounds, bin collection crews, etc. So it's about getting that change in terms of behaviour and responsibility, and we're doing a lot with our crews and managers to make sure we improve performance. So we're working together with our waste contractors. We've got a joint group and we're working really well promoting guidance and safety messages and information. We're supporting operators and organisations to raise standards, and I've launched a CIWM national pledge at the moment for a week of activity in October with many, many organisations and municipalities signing up around that behavioural change. So it's all about people doing the right thing and in terms of performing correctly and doing the simple things and taking responsibility so that people in our industry come to work and go home in the same condition, albeit a little bit tired. We're working with the Health and Safety Executive as well around inspections, inspecting municipalities and contractors to make sure everything's in place, and in some cases it's not. So they're working well with us in taking some tough action. If we look at collection and transportation systems, we've got rear end loading, particularly on wheel bins. We've got curbside sort for boxes. We're using a standard 240 litre bin, which I think is around 60 cubic feet in terms of your wheel bin. So your standard particularly is around a 360. Our standard is a 240 litre, and in some cases a 180 and 140 to promote waste minimisation. We're using boxes and different sizes of container. And in terms of collection frequencies, most authorities, most municipalities are now collecting the garbage every 2 weeks. So a 2 weekly collection of 3 bins. Food waste, sometimes every week. In some municipalities every 2 weeks with garden waste. Dry recyclate, so glass, plastics, cans, mixed papers, cardboard in 1 bin, collected every 2 weeks. And then general garbage collected every 2 weeks. And that's working well in the UK on reducing waste. And we've had to work at that over many years with behaviour change with our residents. So you can see there we've got 3 bins, typically brown for organics, composting, green for residual, general garbage, and blue for dry recyclates, and different sizes of container. So again, we use different sizes around different municipalities promoting waste minimisation and getting residents to do the right thing, which has been backed up by a huge publicity campaign. Some use boxes for different materials, plastics, cardboard, mixed papers, etc. They're collected and emptied separated on the side of the vehicle around getting good quality. And they have dry recyclates being collected at the back. It's a typical picture in a UK street in terms of bin collection. We don't operate single arm, one person, which I know is predominant in many parts of North America. That's because of the car parking problem we have. We can't get down in terms of vehicles and bins being parked so that the arm can collect the bin. We've too many cars parked in streets. We've tried it, it's not efficient, it doesn't work efficiently for us in the UK. That's a food waste collection at the front, and we collect bins at the back as well. Again, crew going down separate collections on a 240 litre bin. So what is the focus? Local councils, local municipalities are setting the policy in terms of collection, but clearly have got landfill tax and landfill directive that are driving them nationally, and that's been the big issue, to change the way our landfill compares with the costs of processing it through a MRF or through anaerobic digestion, energy from waste gasification. Landfill in a year's time is going to be more expensive than any one of those, which is driving that economic change in terms of infrastructure. So the focus is on landfill diversion and recycling targets, and the great British public have got recycling. The challenge for us is around waste prevention. So collection is done, typically half municipalities do it in-house with their own services and employees, and half do it typically with contractors. Waste treatment and disposal is done, all of it is done by the contractor, so materials recycling facilities, gasification, energy from waste, landfill is operated by a contractor, and the contracts are typically 5 to 25 years. We've got ambition in terms of zero waste to landfill, so no waste going to landfill, and we're well on our way with that, with some progressive programmes in Scotland and Wales. And waste prevention is the new game in town. That's the message we've got to get over to the great British public. They feel good about recycling. What we've got to do is only get them to buy what they absolutely need in terms of focusing on waste prevention. So in conclusion, the future. Our responsibility today is to plan for 100 years plus. We can't keep consuming more than one planet when we're actually consuming 3. The EU Waste Framework Directive is currently out for review, and we're looking at promoting higher mandatory targets for material to be diverted away from landfill, so higher levels, so we can minimise more and put more waste back to work. We need to look at policy making in the UK that's long-term, not just short-term. We need to move to a circular economy and create that investment and that those fiscal instruments that will increase capacity for secondary remanufacture, dismantling and redesign, so we can put all these materials back to work in a circular economy. Product design will be the new fashion. That's got to be, and that's what we're promoting, is the new fashion. And the future is all about resource security and efficiency. You've only got to look at the global gas and the impact around resources. It's all about resources and putting those back to work in the longer term. Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, thank you, John. Questions for David or John? Go to the microphones on either side. And I'll ask a question just to start things off. John, you said 70 pounds per ton is the landfill tax. What's the conversion rate to dollars?
You're looking around $110, $112 a ton.
Dollars a ton.
Tax.
What happens, $1 a ton tax? What happens to that money?
That's returned to the British Exchequer, and what they've done in terms of providing incentives over the last 10 years is put some one-off grant funding to provide infrastructure around wheel bins, PFI projects to get infrastructure built, to change the way we manage waste. So some of that money's been put back to municipalities to obtain grant funding, to build energy from waste facilities where we need them in a small amount, to build materials recycling facilities, to build infrastructure, so putting bins on streets and vehicles in terms of promoting recycling and moving away from landfill.
Anyone else have a question? Let me ask one other one. Both of you mentioned extended producer responsibility, and I know the Green Dot system has been very active in Europe and in other parts of the world. How well is that working from your perspectives?
There's more needs to be done in terms of producer responsibility. We're just reviewing the scheme in the UK. There is good engagement with the industry on that, and something I've been meeting the Walmarts of this world, the supermarkets around their product design, the influence they have on the great British public. So we need to raise the game on producer responsibility. It's worked well, but it's a game changer and we've got to step up to the mark.
David?
Well, you know, I think there's a lot of hypocrisy around the whole EPR question. If you talk to the Coca-Colas of the world and the bottle manufacturers and the packaging manufacturers in Europe, they've come to accept that EPR is an essential part of recycling systems, and the money raised from EPR is a big component. In Italy, we calculate it's around about 500 million euro out of a 9 billion euro system. So it's a 5 or 6%, but that money goes to the municipalities that collect the waste and and everybody's happy. You talk to that same company in Brazil and they say, we don't need extended producer responsibility schemes in Brazil. Nothing could be more stupid. Now, there's a lot of hypocrisy there. And I think we have to really, as waste managers, pressure these companies into accepting the responsibility. I think it is ethically unacceptable that people put products into the market which they will not pay for to get back. Ethically, it is wrong. But the money is necessary in, especially developing countries, to ensure that those products are treated properly and collected properly.
Thank you. Question here?
Well, I wanted to ask John to speak a little bit more about the exporting of waste to some countries that had overdeveloped their that's the wrong word, but it developed more than they needed in terms of disposal capacity.
What's happened because of the EU landfill directive and each municipality in Europe having to recycle, by recycling, they have not enough residual waste, so garbage, to fuel the energy from waste facilities. So what we're looking at, because the municipality owns it, they need to feed them in terms of heating systems for their local communities. So there's a lot of export into Netherlands, into Sweden, and into Germany, with very competitive gate fees, including delivered to those countries from the UK. And so around 1 million tonnes at the moment is going over there because it's cheaper. For example, if you look at a gate fee, as John mentioned, at £72 a tonne in terms of landfill tax, in terms of dollars, around £112 a tonne, plus the gate fee, it's cheaper to send it to Europe than it is to send it to landfill. And what we've seen in the UK is landfills reducing, landfills closing early because there's not enough material, because we've got the financial measures in place that are driving value in terms of cardboard, plastics, cans, etc. And we're seeing the organisations like Walmart or retailers are asking residents to bring their cardboard or materials back to the store because they want that material, which is great in terms of the circular economy. And I can see that in the next 10 years been a real challenge in terms of standard municipal collections, where in the UK we provide municipalities provide a standard service. In countries in Europe, it's direct charging, so the customer, the resident, decides when they want their bin picking up. So in Germany, for example, they may want their general garbage picked up every 2-3 weeks, and their recyclables picked up every 2 weeks, and the food waste every week. I went to Burbeck in Germany earlier this year, and they're on a 4-weekly residual collection of garbage because they've got 5-stream collection at the curbside. I can see that happening in the UK in the next 7 or 8 years, given what we're doing, that we'll have a 4-weekly collection in some areas of general garbage because of waste minimisation, a reduction in what's being produced, and recycling and minimisation. And it's about behaviour change. The key challenge that we faced in the UK is communication, is making it simple for our communities to understand, making it clear what they can put in what bin, and making it an everyday habit. And we've got to make it convenient, we've got to make it simple, and that's what we've been focused on for the last 10 years, which has made it come as part of everyday life.
John,
I'll take a question over there.
David, could you talk just a little bit about what you're doing with the Composting Council and organics management specifically in Italy?
Well, of course. Is anybody in a hurry to get home? Well, we started off 15 years ago with this little composting council, and we were composting in Italy, I think, around 200,000 or 300,000 tons, and this year we composted 5 million tons of organic household food waste and organics from garden waste. And we have a system now which is in place where about 1/3 of the population is doing door-to-door 3 times a week or 2 times a week collection of their food waste. We're living in a Mediterranean country. It's hotter, you see, than it is in Britain. And bringing this to anaerobic digestion into compost plants. We have over the last 5 years built some of the biggest anaerobic digestion plants, I think, operating anywhere in the world. One near Venice of about 350,000 tons a year capacity, and others near Milan and various other parts of northern Italy over 150, 200,000 tons a year capacity. So big plants which are then composting the digestate at the end of the process. We put back to soil about 1.5 million tons of quality compost, which is all certified. It achieves quite strict environmental standards, and so it is one of those virtuous success stories of the green economy which we're really proud of. A couple of quick points about it. We have probably the first obligatory rules about the type of the way we can collect our organic waste. We must use compostable bag containers, whether they're paper, whether they're compostable plastics, but they must be compostable so that the bags don't pollute the organic waste stream. Of course, not everybody's perfect. We get plastics as well, but that helps to create very high interception purity rates, that sometimes achieving 97, 98% in whole areas of, and I'm talking about hundreds of thousands of people in whole areas of northern Italy, including the city of Milan, which last year started its organic waste collection, and there we have 97% purity in the collection schemes. And the other point I wanted to make was regarding the question about the incinerators. If I may, John, just make one comment about this. I think we should be careful about our perception about the problem, because there is a momentary problem. Part of the problem is caused because there are still some old incinerators which have yet to close down to finish their life cycle. And when I look at my country, we have about a third to a half of our incinerators which are small in Italy, and they will close over the next 5 to 10 years. So there is a cyclical problem there in terms of the obsolescence of some of the plants. And the second thing is that the Chinese green fence and the recycling markets may change the game much more quickly than we think. It really depends on how forceful the Chinese want to be in stopping low-grade recyclates coming into their economy. And if they do get forceful about it, because once they start to recycle their own, they may well do, then we're not going to have an overcapacity of incineration.
Very good. One more question.
Hi. In regards to that long-term, those 100-plus years planning that you were both speaking about, I'm just curious, how are your organizations including young professionals into these types of, I guess, decisions or strategic planning?
Yeah, excellent point. In terms of the Chartered Institution of Waste Management, we have a new members network, and we have our own conference. So it's not mainly in young people, but we're not exclusive to young people. And what we're looking at, we've got some really vibrant and engaged professionals at a young level. So they speak, we have our own conference, we engage with them, because that's the future in terms of social media, communication, and we've got to engage in that in our sector, whether it's texting, in terms of behaviour, in terms of bin collection and reminders. We're a whole host of opportunities to work with our young people in terms of development and training and long term. And I'll leave you with one thought from me, because I think the children that are born today or in the last 5 years in the UK will say one thing in terms of waste industry, that landfill was so last century.
David, you want to say something about the ISWA young professional?
I'm glad you raised the question, because we have just instituted this year the ISWA, called the Young Professionals Network, I think, and we have our first meeting in Vienna in a month's time, but you can join that meeting by internet, so you don't have to necessarily be in Vienna, and you can click on through the iswa.org website and join it. The lady Kim down on our stand will tell you more. As you can see, I don't really know the electronics of it, but anyway, we do have a Young Professionals Network, and we look forward very much to you contributing to that.
Very good. Before you leave, we're going to do a drawing, but let's give a round of applause to David and John for an excellent session. And David, could I ask you to do the honors and draw the...
Now, before you draw that, one quick note. Dick Ellis, David Currington, Terrence Nelson, Ron Romero, Farida Kia. You're all here, right? Well, what you've done is you've given us your lunch tickets for the next couple of days. So, we have replaced them with tickets, so you're in the drawing, but if you'll stop by the information booth on your way out, we've kind of pulled what you need, and if you don't want your lunch ticket, hey, one look, send it here.
David Newman. Oh, no, sorry. Would you like to read out?
Go ahead. Come up here.
No, the winner is not me. When I was at university, I actually organised a raffle for my football club for 2 tickets to the cup final. And getting a ticket to the cup final of Manchester United is really like having a night with Kate Moss. It's pretty difficult, all right? And so we did this darn raffle, and I won it, and I was the captain of the football team. Of course, everybody said to me, what a fix. Anyway, this is not a fix. The winner is James Neal.
As James comes to get his winnings for the rest of the afternoon, you have a choice between the Waste Conversion Technology Panel Mega Session coming up in this room at 4:30 or several technical sessions, I'm sure you'll find something that interests and challenges you. Be sure to join us here in this room again tomorrow morning at 8:30 for SWANA's annual business meeting, followed by the Lawrence Lecture by Robert Schoenberger, and then the next mega session by Mike Biddle on innovations in recycling. Ladies and gentlemen, Elvis has left the building.